Hello, everyone. This is Jason. I want to make a quick video today about Milo Yiannopoulos. Recently, he advocated that 13 years old was old enough to have sex, consensual sex, with a 28-year-old. Now he differentiates. He says 28 is fine, but 35 might be a little too old. Okay, but he claims because at 13 he had sex with somebody who was apparently about 28, and Milo is a typical abuse victim who hasn't dealt with his abuse. He's a profoundly damaged human being. And he advocated that 14 was perfectly fine for the age of consent. Now, on a personal note, I lost my virginity when I was 14. And it was emotionally difficult. But I didn't lose it to an adult. I lost it to somebody who was in my age group. He is advocating that a 13-year-old can be the aggressor in a relationship with a 28-year-old. And I believe that he didn't say them by name, but I think the one person he was pointing out, one of the people that he wanted to say and just didn't, was Mary Kay Letourneau and Billy Falau. That Billy Falau was this stud at 13 and she was this 22-year-old, whatever she was. And, they're married and have kids, and Billy Falau was the aggressor. Mary Kay Letourneau, if you know anything about her, was a profound, and he didn't mention her. I'm just pointing this out. If you know anything about, if you read about it, she's profoundly damaged and probably was sexually abused when she was a child. Her father was a politician. I'm not saying her father had anything to do with it. I'm just saying he was a rather successful politician in the Seattle area. And her ex-husband moved to Alaska and worked in Alaska, and I actually knew a couple of people that worked with him or knew him at work. Didn't really know him very well, but knew of him. So it destroyed her family. She had kids at the time, but now she's with Billy Falau because she's a profoundly damaged human being. And she never dealt with her abuse. No 13-year-old is ever the aggressor. Anybody that knows that's justification for pedophilia. I'm not calling Milo a pedophile. I think Milo was abused. He admits he had sex. He says he was the aggressor at 13 to this 28-year-old. No, you weren't. Let's stop right there and be very clear. Anytime a child, 13 years old, or a 28 has sex with somebody in that age difference, the child is always the victim. Always. And Joe Rogan in this and his friends on the podcast said, Milo, what if, or they asked the question, what if, so if your friend that was roughly your age, let's say 28, told you that they just had a sex with a 13-year-old and the 13-year-old was the aggressor, what would you say to them? And they all start laughing because it's so silly on the face of it. What would you say? First of all, you'd probably call the police. If you're any kind of sensible person, you've just been told of a crime. And so you're probably gonna make a phone call to the police. But secondly, it's so profoundly disturbing that he could even broach that. But the only way that he could broach that is because he's a sexual abuse victim. And Milo plays the victim card all the time. He plays it all the time. The liberal media, his First Amendment is being, he doesn't like all the First Amendment stuff, anti-First Amendment stuff. And first of all, he's British, so I don't really give a shit what he thinks about our First Amendment. And secondly, it's other people expressing their First Amendment, not the state stopping him, but actual citizens. And there's more of them than there is Milo supporters. So he's being stopped at speaking at certain universities, not all. I don't think anybody should be censored, let me just say that. But if people in the community don't want to fucking hear you, then they have every fucking right to come out and protest you using their First Amendment. And if they win, so be it. But the state did not persecute Milo. And the state, nor should the state ever persecute anybody in First Amendment rights. But to advocate for it clearly comes from an abuse victim. And I hope for Milo's sake and our society's sake that maybe he goes and gets some help and really understands what he's advocating. Being an abuse victim sexual abuse victim it takes your power away. It takes away, that's why people rape. They rape because they're trying to take the power away from the person they're raping. And a little kid, a 13-year-old, and I'm not saying a little kid, just you decide what you define as a child. I define a 13-year-old as a child still. You may be going through puberty, but you are still a child. Go look at your pictures of you at 13 and tell me you were an adult. Just go look back at your yearbook photos at 13 when you're in junior high school, 8th grade. A 28-year-old? I mean, creep. You want to say it's creepy, but it's past creepy. It's pathology of a damaged creature who doesn't want to admit that his power was taken away from him at 13 by somebody that abused him. Because when you're sitting around by yourself and you're looking into yourself and you're looking inward, the last thing you ever want to be is a victim. And people who are truly victimized deny it. So if Milo likes all the attention, it just gets his blog numbers up, it just gets his hits up. So being banned from Berkeley, that's the kind of shit that he likes. He likes that kind of victimization in his mind. But the sexual victimization is so much more profound because it actually matters. It dictates how you are as a person for the rest of your life, how you have relationships with other people, how you feel about sex, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about others. And that's where Milo, that's why he needs a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And maybe he's gone to one, but he needs to go back. He needs to go to one that is specifically for adults that were abused as children. And it's not an emerging field, but there's a lot more doctors out there. I'm a big fan of Derek Jensen, and he talks about his dad sexually raping him and his brother and his mother, and how the abuse could never be talked about. They could talk about anything else. They could talk about the weather. They could talk about politics. But as soon as the abuse was just never discussed. And that's how America is in a lot of ways, and the world is. We don't talk about the sexual abuse that happens to our children every single day. The more we talk about these things, the more it's out in the open, and the more the victims can come forward and get help and be safe. And the more that we identify people in our society that are truly predators. Because if you know anything about pedophilia, you can't fix it. There's a prison, I think it's somewhere in the Southwest, and they're all pedophiles, and none of them can be cured, and they're all free. They all went to jail. They're all free, but they live together in this like huge community because they are not healthy, and a lot of them admit it. They say they can't be around children. There's no drugs that'll do it. Even if they take the sexual desire away, the ideas are still there. The thoughts are still there, and they don't even want to be around kids. They don't even want to see children. Children aren't allowed to visit or anything. So it's a sickness that can't be cured. And do I think that Milo is a pedophile? I would have no idea. Honestly, I don't know if he's had sex with a minor. I have no fucking idea. I don't know. But I do know that he admits that he had sex at 13 with somebody that was much older, and he claims that he was the aggressor. And that means that he's in complete denial about what happened, and that means that anything he says on the subject is really hollow, and really only should be perceived as coming from an abuse victim. So I think his career is over. Or it was circling the drain. I don't know how family value conservatives can justify this. I don't think they can. I don't think they're even going to try. He was already taken off of the CPAC speech. He was already removed. He's lost his book deal. There's cancellations going on right now. This is just breaking. I'm kind of, within the last 24 hours or so. And it's the top story on Drudge. And I think this was the nail in Milo's coffin in a lot of ways, unless, now I'll tell him, he's not ever going to see this, so why would he give a fuck? But if my advice to him would be, get in front of this better, come out and say, I am going to a psychologist who helps adult victims of child abuse. I am beginning the process of healing. Please allow me time to heal. I'll keep you in, that kind of thing. But instead, he tried to defend himself and make himself a victim. And say that it was taken out of context, or they were just spitballing ideas and he shouldn't be held accountable. I mean, Jesus Christ, man, really? Just find it inside yourself to do something that'll help other people. If Milo admits his abuse and he goes and gets help and he talks about it, then other abuse victims will come forward, and conservative victims will come forward in droves. And then we can have this open and honest discussion about why we think it's okay in society not to talk about fucking child sexual abuse. Why we keep it in the darkest secrets in our society when it should be discussed openly so we can solve the problem. So children aren't victims, because it affects them for the rest of their lives. It ruins them. And you can see it with Milo. And it's profound and it's sad, and I feel bad for him, and I feel bad for any, obviously it doesn't have to go, it goes without saying, I feel absolutely terrible or fucking horrified for any child that has to deal with it. And many of us know victims of child abuse. Many of us were victims of child abuse. Many of us have friends of victims of child abuse, family members, etc. And we all know people we love, and we all know that it is a serious fucking issue that for some reason it's so taboo that we're not allowed to discuss it. We can't have an open discussion. The only way you solve these problems, the only way that we can ever get to a point where it has to be discussed. So kids, if it happens to them, don't feel terrified to come out and say it. They don't feel, and police officers and our civil society that we live in helps victims instead of shunning them, or instead of trying to make excuses for the person who victimized the victim. And I think conservatives, Milo's been their guy, and this is not a good look for conservatives. It's not a good look for Breitbart. It's not a good look for Steve Bannon. It's not a good look for people. Milo's a xenophobic. Western culture is the best culture. He says he wishes he wasn't a homosexual. He has deep, deep self-loathing. And I believe that most of it results from him being abused at 13. And now, of course, he's advocating that 13 be the legal age of sex, because 13, 14, because after all, he won't be a victim then. Thank you for listening very much, and thank you.